A promising young swimmer, destined for Olympic glory, mysteriously disappeared beneath the waves of the Pacific during what appeared to be a routine training session. Without warning, without explanation, she was gone. The world assumed she had drowned, a heartbreaking accident that would eventually fade from memory. Yet her mother refused to accept this conclusion. Through 2 agonizing years, she battled against overwhelming despair, holding on to a thread of hope that everyone else had released. Then, one fateful day, hidden beneath layers of marine growth, on an ancient buoy, she uncovered a tiny, unremarkable item that held the power to shatter everything they thought they knew. Our tale opens on a misty dawn at Sunset Cove Marina, where Claire Reynolds stood motionless, gazing across the endless Pacific horizon. Wisps of early morning fog drifted across the water's surface like ghostly veils. 2 years had elapsed since her daughter, Emily Reynolds, had vanished without explanation. Emily, barely 19, had shown tremendous promise as an open-water swimmer, her sights set firmly on the approaching Olympic trials. Those aspirations died on a beautiful spring day near Santa Barbara's coastline when Emily plunged into the ocean for her regular practice and simply never emerged. Claire, who had once radiated energy and joy, now carried the exhaustion of relentless sorrow. She adjusted her grip on the wetsuit strap, her eyes falling to the weathered Zodiac inflatable tied to the pier, the same vessel she'd used for countless fruitless searches along California's shores. Others urged her to abandon hope, but deep within her soul, Claire understood that surrender wasn't possible. Emily had honed her skills in the waters around the Channel Islands from childhood, following a demanding regimen from the marina to Point Dume and return, a punishing 6-mile circuit. Claire had always shadowed her in a support vessel until Emily declared her readiness to train independently. "I've got to challenge myself, Mom. Everything will be okay," she'd insisted with her characteristic blend of determination and persuasion. Claire had reluctantly consented. Then Emily disappeared. Search and rescue teams scoured the area. Professional divers were contracted. Missing person flyers covered every shoreline from Malibu to Ventura. Yet the sea guarded its mysteries. No swimwear, no cap, not even Emily's GPS device surfaced. Specialists concluded she'd likely been caught by a riptide and swept out to deep water. An unfortunate mishap, they declared. Claire refused to believe it. This particular morning felt unique. Claire couldn't articulate why, but after endless months of desperation and fruitless expeditions, an inner voice urged her forward. She launched the inflatable and navigated toward a collection of markers near Anacapa Island. She'd examined this location repeatedly, yet something compelled her to investigate once more. The morning sun pierced the haze as Claire maneuvered closer to a storm-battered buoy. Unlike the newer, pristine markers the Coast Guard maintained, this one showed its age, scarred by salt spray and countless storms. As she approached, an unusual detail caught her attention. A small device secured near the buoy's central column, partially concealed by barnacles and kelp. Claire's pulse quickened. She cut the engine, allowing the boat to drift alongside. Pulling on protective gloves, she carefully extracted the object. It was a waterproof container, heavily corroded but structurally sound. As she examined it closely, her breathing stopped. Faintly carved into the scratched surface read, "E. Reynolds." With shaking hands, she pried open the container. Inside, incredibly well-preserved, lay a compact digital camera, a rugged action model she immediately recognized. This was Emily's training documentation camera, a gift Claire had given her after Emily qualified for nationals. Claire had insisted on it for safety and record-keeping purposes. Emily had protested, but eventually agreed. "If it stops you from worrying, fine," she'd said, stuffing the device into her equipment bag. Claire's movements became automatic as she secured the camera in a waterproof pouch. The temptation to examine the contents immediately was overwhelming, but her instincts warned against it. She needed professional assistance. If footage had survived, it might hold vital clues. The engine roared as she headed for shore, her thoughts spinning. Detective Marcus Shaw from the Santa Barbara Police had handled Emily's case 2 years earlier. A gruff yet compassionate officer, Shaw had maintained contact long after the official investigation concluded. Claire fumbled for her phone, excitement and terror making her fingers clumsy. "Detective Shaw," came the familiar voice. "It's Claire," she managed, her voice unsteady. "I've discovered something, Emily's camera. It was attached to a buoy near Anacapa." Silence. Then, "Bring it to headquarters immediately. Don't handle anything else." Claire agreed. As she raced toward the marina, she noticed how the shoreline appeared transformed today, clearer, more defined. Hope was risky, but it surged through her system, revitalizing her exhausted spirit. 30 minutes later, Claire reached the Santa Barbara Police Department, her heart pounding as she gripped the waterproof bag. Officer Ramirez recognized her instantly and escorted her to the technical laboratory, a sterile environment filled with computers and forensic equipment. Ethan Brooks, a meticulous forensic expert, waited inside. He acknowledged Claire with a reassuring gesture and immediately began examining the camera. Each procedure was documented, every action deliberate and careful. Claire remained perfectly still, her hands clenched in her lap as Ethan extracted the memory card and connected it to a secure computer system. "Batteries completely dead," Ethan murmured, speaking more to himself than Claire. "But the storage device appears undamaged. No water penetration." Claire barely dared to breathe as the files began transferring. The initial image materialized. Emily's beaming face, her soaked hair clinging to her head, as she positioned the camera on the buoy. Claire gasped audibly. "She's there," she whispered, tears flowing freely. Ethan advanced through the footage. Emily's voice emerged from the speakers, slightly distorted, but unmistakably hers. "Practice session, March 15th. Weather looks good. Water's around 63 degrees. Feeling confident." She flashed her signature smile at the lens, making Claire's chest ache with longing. The recording showed Emily fine-tuning the camera's position, fastening it securely to the buoy's framework. Then she slipped into the water, her powerful strokes slicing through the swells as she headed toward the distant coastline. Ethan fast-forwarded through the routine segments. Then the situation changed. In the background, a small motorboat appeared, moving unpredictably. Emily, initially just a distant figure, stopped and treaded water, obviously noticing the approaching vessel. The camera's elevated position provided a broad view, though insufficient to capture faces or specific details. "Can you improve the image quality?" Claire asked, her voice cracking. Ethan magnified the image, but clarity remained limited. Still, something was discernible: a logo on the boat's hull, a stylized marlin jumping over blue waves with Pacific Blue Charters written below. Ethan immediately captured screenshots. The footage revealed Emily waving toward the boat, possibly assuming it was a rescue craft or support team. The vessel moved closer. A figure leaned over the edge, calling out something. Emily hesitated, continuing to tread water. Suddenly, 2 men dove from the boat into the ocean. Claire's stomach clenched. In the recording, Emily turned and attempted to swim away, but one of the men reached her within seconds. They hauled her, fighting, toward their boat. Her bright swimming cap appeared once, twice, then vanished beneath the surface. The boat accelerated away, leaving only churning white water. Claire sat paralyzed, her body shaking. Tears obscured her vision. "We have the timestamp," Ethan said grimly. "And we have the business name." Detective Shaw entered at that moment, his expression serious. Claire rose, the bag falling from her grasp. "She's alive," Claire said, barely audible. "She was abducted." Shaw placed his hand on her shoulder. "And we're going to locate her." Detective Shaw studied the blurry boat image intently, his brow furrowed. "Pacific Blue Charters operated from Ventura Harbor," he said slowly. "At least they did. Their operating permit lapsed about 12 months ago. There were whispers about questionable activities, but insufficient evidence for a formal investigation." Claire wiped her eyes, struggling to process the emotional flood coursing through her. "If they took Emily, perhaps they're still operating somewhere," she whispered. Shaw nodded gravely. "We must act quickly." After 2 years, if these individuals discover we're onto them, they might make desperate moves. We have one opportunity. Within minutes, a response team assembled. Claire demanded to accompany them despite Shaw's objections, and he didn't argue extensively. He understood the futility of denying a determined mother her mission. They traveled. South along the coast, a convoy of unmarked police cars weaving through traffic on Highway 101. Claire stared through the window, memories of Emily flooding back. Early mornings bundling her daughter in warm towels after swim practice. The excitement in Emily's eyes when her Olympic trial invitation arrived. Her nervous humming before competitions. At Ventura Harbor, they divided into groups. Shaw and Claire approached the abandoned Pacific Blue charter office, shuttered and empty, its windows covered with plywood. The ocean breeze whipped Claire's hair as they drew near. Shaw pried open the door with a crowbar, and they entered the stale darkness. Scattered brochures covered the floor, and the musty smell of decay permeated the air. Claire spotted a faded bulletin board with photographs pinned to it. Happy tourists displaying their catches, sunset cruise, passengers raising champagne glasses. And there, tucked in the corner, was a grainy photograph that stopped Claire's heart. The same boat from the camera footage, unmistakable with its blue marlin logo. Next to the photo, a name was hastily scribbled. On a label, Captain Rick Mason. Shaw photographed it with his phone. "Let's see if our friend Rick is still around," he muttered, already calling dispatch for a background check. Meanwhile, another team canvassed the marina, showing the boat image to local dock workers and business owners. Soon, a marina attendant, an elderly man with sun-weathered skin and keen eyes, recognized the logo. "Haven't spotted that vessel recently," he said, scratching his chin. "But there's been talk." Some of the former Pacific Blue crew didn't just vanish when the company collapsed. They relocated south toward Oxnard, operating under new identities. Word is they still handle private charters, no questions asked. Shaw listened attentively, pressing for specifics. After several tense minutes, they had a fresh lead, a private dock in Oxnard, little known and poorly regulated, ideal for covert operations. By early afternoon, they reached the location. The dock was hidden behind an aging warehouse, a forgotten stretch of waterfront ignored by most authorities. Several boats floated peacefully, including one bearing a hastily concealed Marlin logo, still faintly visible beneath fresh white paint. Claire's heart raced as they advanced. Shaw signaled the officers to spread out, approaching cautiously. No one wanted to alarm whoever might be inside. Claire remained behind, watching from behind stacked crates, her fists clenched so tightly her nails cut into her palms. Shaw and another detective approached the small office at the dock's end. Through the dirty window, they observed movement. A man hunched over a desk, speaking animatedly on his phone. At Shaw's signal, officers burst through the entrance. Claire couldn't hear the conversation, but within moments, the man, later identified as Rick Mason himself, was handcuffed, loudly protesting about a misunderstanding. Claire stepped forward, trembling with rage and hope. Mason's eyes darted toward her, and something crossed his face. Recognition, perhaps fear. Back at headquarters, Mason sat silently during questioning, but Shaw knew how to apply pressure. Gradually, under mounting stress and the threat of serious charges, Mason broke. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that," he mumbled. "We just collected girls for private events. Clients wanted fresh faces, athletic types. Nobody was supposed to get hurt." Claire felt nausea rise in her throat. Her daughter reduced to merchandise, a commodity. Shaw leaned forward. "Where is she?" Mason hesitated, then surrendered. They transferred the girls to a private compound inland, an old estate near Ojai, concealed behind an avocado grove. High walls, massive security. Nobody enters or leaves without authorization. Plans materialized rapidly. Local authorities coordinated with federal agents for an immediate response. They couldn't risk alerting anyone at the compound. If Emily's captors realized law enforcement was approaching, they might flee with the victims, or worse. Claire was prohibited from joining the raid. a restriction that nearly drove her to madness with frustration. She waited anxiously at the command center, clutching a worn photograph of Emily against her chest. Hours dragged like eternities until finally, word crackled over the radio. Target secured. Multiple hostages recovered. No casualties. Claire collapsed, in tears of relief as Detective Shaw crossed the room, his face tight with emotion. "We found them," he said simply. "We found Emily." Claire felt her legs might buckle as she rushed to the waiting police SUV, Detective Shaw beside her. The journey to the recovery site seemed endless, tires humming frantically against the pavement. Shaw said little, only that Emily was safe, alert, and receiving medical attention from on-site paramedics. Claire gripped the seatbelt, her mind cycling through childhood memories of Emily. The scent of her hair after beach days, the sparkle in her eyes after winning her first medal, all colliding with her desperate need to see her daughter's face again. Upon arriving at the compound, now buzzing with law enforcement activity, Claire barely waited for the vehicle to stop before throwing open her door. She scanned the scene frantically until she spotted a paramedic kneeling beside a slight figure wrapped in a silver emergency blanket, sitting on an ambulance's rear bumper. Claire stumbled forward, tears streaming. Emily looked up at the commotion, and for a moment they simply stared at each other, disbelief and raw emotion leaving them both trembling. Then Emily cried out, "Mom!" and Claire ran the remaining steps, gathering her daughter in her arms. Emily felt smaller than Claire remembered, thinner, but she was solid, alive, real. Claire pressed her face into Emily's hair, breathing in the salty, sun-warmed scent, anchoring herself to this miraculous moment. "I knew you'd find me," Emily whispered, her voice hoarse but steady. Claire pulled back enough to cup her daughter's face, marveling at the courage still burning in Emily's ocean-blue eyes. "I never stopped searching," Claire said, her voice breaking. They held each other until a paramedic gently reminded them that Emily needed comprehensive medical evaluation. Claire stayed close as Emily was led to a mobile treatment unit where doctors checked her vitals and examined her for injuries. Meanwhile, Detective Shaw approached, his expression mixing satisfaction with concern. "Claire, can we speak?" Claire nodded, her heart pounding again for different reasons. Shaw led her aside, speaking quietly. "We recovered 7 girls, all approximately Emily's age, all in similar physical condition. Some had been missing for months, others for years. The people operating this ring disguised it as an elite athletic training facility. They recruited talented young women under false promises, scholarships, sponsorships, Olympic dreams." Claire's stomach turned as she listened. They were kept isolated, heavily monitored, trained rigorously to maintain appearances when sponsors or investors visited. But behind the facade, it was forced labor, manipulation, abuse. Claire closed her eyes, waves of rage and grief threatening to overwhelm her. Emily was strong, she whispered fiercely. "She survived this." Shaw nodded. "She's a fighter, Claire. They all are. The ringleaders are in custody, and with the evidence we've gathered, they'll face federal charges. It's finished." Claire opened her eyes, wiping her face. Not for Emily. This is just her beginning. She returned to Emily's side as doctors completed their examinations. Emily clutched her mother's hand tightly, her body trembling despite the warm afternoon sun. "Can I go home now?" she asked, her voice small. "Yes, sweetheart," Claire promised. "Let's take you home." The drive back to Santa Barbara was quiet, both women exhausted beyond words. Emily rested her head on her mother's shoulder, breathing evenly, but shallowly, as if afraid to completely relax until surrounded by familiar comforts. Claire glanced at her reflection in the side window, seeing a different woman than the one who had begun a desperate search 2 years ago. She was battered but unbroken, and her daughter was here against all odds. When they pulled into their modest bungalow's driveway a few blocks from the beach, late afternoon light cast golden stripes across the front yard. Emily hesitated at the Tudurkin, and Claire squeezed her hand before unlocking it. Inside, everything remained unchanged. Claire had refused to alter anything, clinging to hope for Emily's return. Emily moved through the house slowly, touching familiar objects, the framed family photographs lining the hallway, the well-worn sofa where they'd watched countless movies, the kitchen counter where she'd once prepared late-night sandwiches after the lengthy swim practices. Claire prepared Emily's favorite meal, grilled cheese and tomato soup, and they sat together at the kitchen table, initially eating in silence. After a few spoonfuls, Emily set down her spoon and met her mother's gaze. "They told us nobody was searching," she said quietly. "They said our families had moved on, that we were forgotten." Claire reached across the table and grasped Emily's hand firmly. "They lied," she said fiercely. "I never gave up. Not for one moment. And there were so many people who cared, friends, neighbors, even strangers who prayed for you, who joined the search, who never stopped hoping." Tears slid down Emily's cheeks, but this time they were tears of healing, not despair. Over the following days, Claire and Emily began the slow, difficult process of rebuilding. Emily slept restlessly, awakening from nightmares that left her gasping and shaking. Claire sat with her through long nights, whispering reassurances and holding her until the trembling stopped. There were countless interviews with investigators, counselors, and medical staff, but Claire shielded Emily from the worst of it whenever possible, allowing her daughter to set the pace. One bright morning, a week later, Emily asked to visit the beach. Claire hesitated, fear flashing through her chest, but she saw the determination in Emily's eyes and agreed. They drove to a quiet coastline stretch near Rincon Point, where Emily had learned to swim as a child. Emily stood at the water's edge, staring across the rolling waves. Claire remained close, watching her daughter with protective vigilance sharpened by pain and love. After a long moment, Emily turned and smiled faintly. "I'm not afraid of the ocean," she said. "It wasn't the ocean that tried to break me. It was people. And they failed." Claire felt tears prick her eyes, but willed herself to remain strong. Emily stepped into the surf, letting the cold Pacific water wash over her feet. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply. And for a moment, Claire glimpsed the fierce, determined girl she had always been, the fighter, the survivor. In time, Emily would heal. It wouldn't be quick, and it wouldn't be easy, but she would reconstruct her life stronger and wiser. Claire knew there would be scars, but there would also be victories, small at first, then greater, until one day Emily would not be defined by what had been done to her, but by what she had overcome. As they stood together on the shoreline, the sun sinking low in the sky, Claire whispered a silent prayer of gratitude. Against all odds, they had found each other again. Whatever storms lay ahead, they would weather them together, as they always had, as they always would.